Alright everyone, I'm here to give you a video. And this video is going to be on WCW versus WWF, the Monday Night Wars. And on the network, they've been playing lately the Monday Night Wars, like how everything came to be. And I always meant to watch it, but I never had the time because I was always doing other things. But today I had the time to watch this one. And I figured every Tuesday I do a review like this about the Monday Night Wars. And that's exactly what I intend to do. So let's get right into it, right? If you don't know about the Monday Night Wars, then there's something obviously wrong with you. You don't deserve to be a WWE fan or just a wrestling fan in general. But this will educate you on the Monday Night Wars. This talks about the story about the Monday Night Wars. And actually, it was good stuff. And they talked about how different stuff happened, which I will talk about and eventually, like what happened during the wars, and that this was like a great war between Ted Turner's WCW, which stood for World Championship Wrestling, and Vince McMahon's WWF, which stood for World Wrestling Federation, but now known as today as WWE, which is World Wrestling Entertainment. And I guess it started back. They talked about the first thing it really showed was Macho Man Randy Savage winning the WWF Championship, beating the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase for it. That's like the first thing it showed. But this was good stuff. It starts out by telling you about Hulk Hogan, because it always tells you about Hulk Hogan, and people like John Cena, CM Punk, and Jerry the King Lawler were talking about how he defined wrestling. He made wrestling really what it was. He made wrestling big, and that if you didn't know anything about wrestling, but you mentioned wrestling, Hulk Hogan was the first name to be mentioned, and that's so true. Hulk Hogan made the WWE what it is. You could say it was all had to do with Vince McMahon too, but Hulk Hogan was defined the WWE. Like, who knows where wrestling would be? No, not just WWE, but wrestling. Who knows what wrestling would be if Hulk Hogan never was around? So I thought that was good, interesting stuff. And they talked about how they were a promotion. They talked about how they had this that WWE, well, the WWF used to be on the USA Network, and they were called, I'm trying to remember what they were called, American Wrestling Alliance, I think it was. It was like, they had a different TV show like that, but they were also on Ted Turner's TV station, and he held like baseball, basketball, and he also had a wrestling company called Jim Crockett Productions. Well, that was what they owned, but it was called NWA, which stood for the National Wrestling Alliance. And I know a little bit about the NWA. I know Hulk Hogan was there. I know all these other superstars were there. And I guess what happened was the war really started then. Because they talked about too how Vince McMahon made wrestling like a little wrestling company. Like not many people. It was just really small arenas. But Vince McMahon made it a global wide international wrestling organization, and that's so true. It was all because of Vince McMahon. He had a vision and he utilized it. And Ted Turner, but the real war started was when Ted Turner no longer wanted to continue running the WWF on their product, on their station, because they were on the USA Network. So Vince McMahon was like, okay, you don't want to do business with me, I don't want to do business with you. So they went separate ways, and I guess that's where you could say the war really started. And they really went on, though. They talked about how they had all the WrestleManias. They had this first WrestleMania, then the second, and then they had WrestleMania 3, which drew an attendance record of 93,000 and something people. And they were really doing well. They were having success. They were winning all these superstars like Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, and wrestling was really big. It was cool to be a wrestling fan. And then eventually the NWA couldn't keep competing with the WWF. They eventually went out of business, and Ted Turner bought the NWA and made it WCW. And Ted Turner told Vince McMahon that he's in the wrestling business. And Vince McMahon's like, okay, well, I'm in the sport. You may be in the wrestling business, but I'm in the sports entertainment business, and that's two completely different philosophies. And we'll get to more about that, though. So then Vince McMahon realized something, though, that what they were doing wasn't working. No one was enjoying really wrestling. It was kind of going on a downward spiral. They weren't really enjoying what they were giving them. They even showed the gobbledygook getting hatch out of the egg and fans booing, because I bet that shit was terrible, man. And then it showed like the Earthquake giving them a Quake burger, the Bushwhackers acting like clowns on primetime television, and they were just doing it just wasn't doing very well. And Vince McMahon decided to change that, because as a wrestling company, talked about how you have to grow from different time periods. So he decided to start going live every Monday. And they were going to go live, and then we're going to call it Monday Night Raw. So this was the birth of Monday Night Raw. And it was good stuff. They talked about how live was good, and that it was a good show. You know, anything can happen live. It's uncensored. And it showed, it was the first time they had done something like that. It was in a New York crowd. And, yeah, Vince McMahon really made Monday Night Raw, and it was good stuff. They had all the new superstars, Monday Night Raw. Like, Monday Night Raw was the show to watch. But they couldn't go live every week. It was normally every other week they went live, because at the time he didn't have the money, I think he said, and the technology to do that. So it was like every other week that they went live. And then WCW acquired a guy, Eric Bischoff. And it showed a video of him talking about the documentary from 2003. And when Ted Turner would talk to it, he was talking like from 1998. And what happened was WCW couldn't really compete with the WWF. So Eric Bischoff was going to change all that. And they were talking about how it was mainly a Mid-South wrestling company that only people from only the Southerns were really doing well with it. And they had Southern commentators, so he got rid of those, and he brought in new commentators. I believe were Tony Schiavone, which he thought was good, Mean Gene Okerlund, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, which they did a little skit like, "What are you doing here? Why are you following me?" He's like, "I work here now. Ted and his wife, I forget her name, hired me here." And it was awesome stuff. He's like, "You follow me everywhere you go." And then they talked about how they were in the yellow, dim lighted arenas, that they weren't really in good arenas. So he went and moved them into like the Disney World arena, and which he did, which was successful, and that was good stuff. And then what happened was, since WWF, I know this is a lot of jumping around, but WWF was moving towards the new generations of superstars like Diesel, or Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon or Scott Hall, 1-2-3 Kid or X-Pac, or Sean Waltman, Yokozuna, Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels, Psycho Sid. They were moving in that kind of era. Lex Luger even. And Hulk Hogan didn't really, he was like the old guys. So they peacefully, Hulk Hogan, and Vince McMahon peacefully let him out of his contract, and he went on to start doing a TV show. I forget the name of it. Him and Jimmy Hart did that together, and it was like right next to where WCW was always being held. So Eric Bischoff offered Hulk Hogan a contract for WCW, and Hulk Hogan caved because he had missed wrestling so much. So he went with him and Jimmy Hart went with WCW, and they even filmed his contract signing. It showed him getting contract signing. It was like a big moment, and it really was a big deal. Hulk Hogan, that was a big name to have for WCW. Like, I think that's when they realized shit was going down. When Hulk Hogan joined WCW. And I thought that was awesome stuff. You know, it was really shocked because Hulk Hogan was always a WWF guy. He was always in the WWF, and then he went to the WCW. It was like, oh shit, you know, shit's going down. Now the war's starting to approach. Like, that's, I think, when they realized that they could That's when Vince McMahon even realized that, from business standpoint, he's like, oh, we're in trouble here. And if he took it kind of personally, because Hulk Hogan even did say that he would never compete with the WWF. He would never compete with Vince McMahon. So that was kind of it. But he caved. And it was a big deal. His first match in WCW at Bash at the Beach when he wrestled Ric Flair for the title. He drew a big attendance record, a big pay-per-view buy, which makes a lot of sense. And it was awesome stuff that that Hulk Hogan joined WCW. It was a big deal. But then it gets even more shocking. Since Hulk Hogan left WWF, they needed someone to fill his shoes. And they were going to have Lex Luger. They were giving him this big American who he had the Legs Express. They were giving him this big push. He was going to be the next Hulk Hogan of the WWF. But it doesn't go as planned, and I'll tell you why later on in this video. But then Macho Man Randy Savage, and he was with the WWF. He said he would always be loyal to the WWF. He would never leave the WWF, But then it got worse. So since they were moving in that new generation, he didn't need Macho Man Randy Savage to wrestle. Vince McMahon wanted him to be on commentary. And he hated it. You could totally tell. If you watched a match when Macho Man Randy Savage was commentating, I could totally tell he hated it. Macho Man Randy Savage hated being on commentary. He wanted to be a wrestler. And one of the things, he's like, it even showed a clip of him saying, I'm sick and tired of just sitting in this chair on the mic. And he went off. He hated being on commentary. So he talked to Hulk Hogan, and he wanted to work for WCW because he just didn't like where he was. So then within like 3 or 4 weeks, him and Eric Bischoff made a deal, and he went to WCW. And everyone was shocked, you know. They were shocked Hulk Hogan went. The Miz even was shocked. And now Macho Man Randy Savage jumped. Like, everyone was shocked. No one expected Macho Man Randy Savage to jump to WCW. And then they even played this clip how Vince McMahon was talking about how, unfortunately, they couldn't come to an agreement on their contract. And he thanked them for all the contributions that he had with the WWF. So that was a shock that Macho Man Randy Savage jumped. So then eventually, other superstars on him, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, the Nasty Boys, which I don't know who's in that tag team, so you're going to have to look that up for yourselves. And Hacksaw Jim Duggan jumped. So it was like everybody was going to WCW. It was pretty much how someone described it, I forget who, like an open checkbook. Anyone could go to, you didn't know who was going to go to WCW. My uncle described this like, one day someone could be in the WWF, the next they could be in the WCW, or vice versa. So that was awesome stuff. Then, so since the WCW had all those guys, Hulk Hogan, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage, they had the bigger stars. But the WWF, Bret Hart thinks they always had the better wrestling matches, because they, you know, if match for match, the better matches you would see would be on WWF Raw. So I thought that was awesome stuff. And I bet that was true because you had guys like Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, who probably hates my guts, Owen Hart, King Kong Bundy, even though he wasn't like a, you know, but still, Yokozuna, Undertaker was starting to make his way up the roster. Yokozuna, Coco Beware, even though he was a jobber, but it's still a name. Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid or X-Pac, Diesel, you know, all of those names. And then eventually, they were still kind of having trouble competing with WWF because of Raw. WCW didn't have a live show. I think their show was called Clash of Champions, I believe. And Ted Turner asked Eric Bischoff what to do about it, and he said, well, why don't you go on primetime television? So he said, that's a good idea. 2 hours every Monday. We're going to go on TNT, and we're going to have a 2-hour live special. And it's going to be called WCW Monday Nitro. And that was a good idea. And they really had to plan something out for this, because Um, this was a big show, and they wanted to do something about it. And then they heard Stin, who was longtime friends with Lex Luger. He knew that his contract was coming up, but Lex Luger and Eric Bischoff didn't get along. They didn't really say why, but they didn't have a good relationship. So he had a feeling he wasn't going to be able to get him to join WCW. So he just threw out, hey, I'll give you $100,000 or something. It was like a lot of money. And he took the deal because he wanted to work with guys like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Sting. He wanted to wrestle these guys. And so he took the deal, and he felt very skeptical about it, though, because the WWF had always been very good to him. He was getting pushed really good. He would have been pretty much like the next Hulk Hogan at the WWF. But then his contract was coming up on Sunday, so they wanted to keep this quiet and save it for the first Monday Night Nitro show. And they did a good job of that because he normally, Lex Luger even said that he in the wrestling business he usually gives like a 2-week notice if he's gonna leave. That's usually what you do. But if he did that, then it would have been spoiled and everything would have been spoiled. So they wanted to keep this quiet, so he didn't really have an option. And they didn't even have him stay at the hotel that the other wrestlers were staying at, and he didn't show up until 30 minutes he was supposed to go on the air. And when he came in through the back door, they covered him in towels, and then he went on Q. And they talked, and WCW Monday Night Nitro too, I forgot to mention, was filmed in a mall, which I thought was cheap, which I thought is like in a mall. How often do you hear a wrestling company be filmed in a mall? I think some people said that was cheesy. I think Arn Anderson said it was cheesy, but the wrestling wasn't cheesy, they said. And I thought that was good stuff. And then it shows him saying, I'm sick and tired of playing around with the little babies. And I want to play, and I'm here to play with the big boys like you, Hulk Hogan. So I thought that was good stuff. And WWF was going on that down as well, but the ratings weren't doing that bad. 1 week WWF would win, the next week WCW would win, but it wasn't by much. I think 1 week it was always like by very slim. It would be like 2.5 to 2.6, which is good stuff. You know, it wasn't like by very large. Then it gets worse. Well, then Medusa went to WCW and she threw the WWF Women's Championship in the trash against her will. You've seen that before. I forget her name now. She had a different name in WWF, so I don't remember the name. But it gets worse, and they do dirty things. Eric Bischoff, and I knew about this too. Like, since WCW came on before WWF, they didn't have that advantage. And since WWF Raw was taped, Eric Bischoff would give away, like, all of the, he'd give the spoilers away. He would give all the matches away. Like, for example, Shawn Michaels 1 week wrestled Psycho Sid for the Intercontinental Championship. He gave that match away. He's like, by the way, Shawn Michaels beat Psycho Sid. He would give the matches away. And it was a dirty move. It was like, I thought it was pretty dirty, but it was a good idea, because it keeps people from wanting to watch the WWF. Because normally for me, if I knew something was getting spoiled, I still would watch anyways, probably. But I probably wouldn't like watching the show as much because I'm like, I already know who wins this match. What's the point of watching this? So I thought that was decent stuff. I thought that was a good idea. And Cody Rhodes, Kofi Kingston, The Miz, and talked about how it was cold, but it was a good business move. And it really was a good business move. Like, it was good stuff. And Vince McMahon said, hey, it's not personal, it's just business. Well, Vince McMahon says he takes his business personally, and it's so true, like, because if this has happened and no one's gonna want to really watch his show because they already know the results of his matches, and that could put him out of business. So they did something about it, and they didn't really do I think a good thing about it, because they never really referenced that they were at war with WCW. So they did like these skits where they made fun of like WCW. They had someone there was like a parody of WCW with Ted Turner someone playing Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, and instead of Macho Man, they call him the Nacho Man. And it was just pretty much them making fun of Hulk Hogan, talking about how he's washed up. But it backfired. Because I think people said that they would switch, because Hulk Hogan would be on a walker, that they would switch to WCW just to make sure that they're not that he's not on a walker, that he's not on a walker, that they're all not like that they all are still relevant, that they can still go. And it was a bad idea because they were like on top at the time, and they don't want to like reference the competition, so that was a bad idea. And then it just talked about how this was a war, that this is when the war really started. And people would watch two television sets. There would be some WWF fans, there would be some WCW fans, or there'd be both. Why? I think Brodus Clay even said he would watch them on both TVs. He would watch, people would have two TVs set up and would watch one show. And I thought that was good stuff. And then now they're going to talk about all the superstars. Like Mankind came, they had Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Chris Jericho, and I thought that was good stuff. And Triple H even said that this is a war and you can't really lose, you move on. Because if you lost the war, you'd be out of business. So, that's kind of how it ended. And it was a tremendous war. And you had superstars too, like talking about it, doing the documentary. Kevin Nash, John Cena, Vince McMahon, Shane, all the McMahon family except for Stephanie McMahon talked, which I thought was awkward. Maybe she was too young to really know about this or something. No, I actually, that's not true, but I don't know why she didn't say anything. CM Punk, which was a surprise. Ryback, Bret Hart. Surprised Shawn Michaels didn't really cover anything. Pat Patterson, Roddy Piper. It was a bunch of people did this documentary, and I thought it was good stuff. And it was nice to see how the war started, I didn't really know how the war started necessarily. Like, I knew they were at war because both companies became big, but I didn't know how the companies became big. It was like this was really a documentary of how both companies came to be the biggest they are. And I thought it was good stuff. And Eric Bischoff, I knew he contributed a lot to WCW, but I didn't know how. It was nice to see how that happened. And I'm glad I finally got to do this review, because I had watched this this is the third time I had watched this. I watched this 2 fucking times, and I never got to do the review of it because I always got busy doing something else. I'm glad I got to review this finally. And every Tuesday I'm going to do a review like this. I'm going to do a Monday Night Wars video. It doesn't make sense, I know, but it's every Tuesday because I do other things Monday, so that's kind of how it's going to be. But that's pretty much it, guys. I might come back later on and make another video, but we'll see what happens. That's pretty much it, guys. Peace out.